Chapter 5 Eggs. James got back to campus shortly before 7 o'clock, giving him an hour to clean up, change into uniform, and down some food. He was already knackered from the mission, and while he knew the adrenaline rush would keep him alert through the overnight training exercise, the loss of a night's sleep would leave his body out of sync over the upcoming weekend. Kerry was taking her tray across to scrape when James arrived in the canteen. She'd eaten with Gabrielle and the rest of her team, and they'd clearly been discussing their strategy for the exercise. She gave James a peck on the cheek as she passed by. "Good luck tonight, sweetie," she said, grinning sarcastically. "It'd be so sad if your team ended up finishing with no eggs and getting that punishment run." "What punishment run?" James asked. 10 kilometres with heavy packs. Sounds like fun, eh?" "Really?" James gasped. "Oh man, I don't know any of this stuff. I try to get hold of Lauren, but she's not in her room and her mobile's off." You mean to say," Kerry giggled, shaking her head. "James, have you even met up with all the members of your team yet?" Kerry looked back at Gabrielle and the 3 other kids on her team, who were lined up behind her, holding their dinner trays. They exchanged knowing glances and shook their heads. "I wouldn't get too cocky," James said, trying to sound like he wasn't ruffled. "Ewart told me some stuff about the egg battle on the drive back, and he gave me a few pointers." As Kerry's team filed away, James realised he had to find Lauren fast. If they arrived at the combat training area without having studied the maps and made a plan, they'd get wiped out. He grabbed a burger and fries, sat at the nearest table, and started wolfing them down. "Yo, bro!" James was relieved to look over his shoulder and find Lauren, Bethany, and Jake heading towards him. But the training exercise went clean out of his mind. "Oh my God! What have you done to your head?" Lauren grinned. "Like it?" "It's, black. I bet Mum's spinning in her grave." Lauren was wounded by James's remark. "Do you really think she'd be upset?" James sensed he'd hit a nerve and changed tack. "Nah, don't sweat it. Mum would probably be surprised you waited as long as you did. You must have asked her 50 billion times. Just don't get that nose ring you were after as well." Lauren shook her head. "We're not allowed to pierce anything except our ears before we're 16. So does it look okay? Or what?" "It's not terrible," James shrugged. "But most boys prefer blondes, you know?" Lauren looked at Bethany. "That's the best reason I've heard yet for dyeing it black." James grinned. "I can't wait until you get your first boyfriend. I'm gonna have so much fun teasing you." "Don't hold your breath," Lauren sneered. "So what's happened to Dana?" James asked. Bethany shrugged. "Cheesy went back to her room." "Why do they call her Cheesy?" Jake asked. "'Cause she doesn't wash," Bethany grinned. James smiled. "She's not a girly girl, and she's a loner, so some of the others take the mickey. I know she wears scruffy uniform and that, but I've sparred with her in the dojo, and she smells as fresh as anyone else." "James fancies her," Bethany giggled. Bethany severely got on James's nerves at times, and this was one of them. He shot her a furious look. "God, Bethany, I really wish you'd grow up." "Did you beat her?" Jake asked. Lauren laughed. "James couldn't beat Dana. He got nailed by Bethany, and she's 10. Jake nodded. "Yeah, James, you're strong, but you're really slow." "Bethany didn't pin me, I slipped," James huffed. He was anxious to steer the conversation away from humiliating reminders of losing a fight to a 10-year-old girl. "Anyhow, we've got less than 15 minutes to plan our strategy." Bethany unrolled a map of the combat training area. Lauren and Jake held down the corners to stop it curling up. James swallowed his last couple of chips and rubbed his salty fingertips on his trousers as he tried to sound like leadership material. Okay, here's what we'll do, James said, walking his fingers across the map. There's our drop point. So as soon as the mission starts, we'll head for this high ground here. We can station scouts here and here and pick off anyone who tries to come near us. Good plan, Lauren said. Just one teensy problem. What? That particular piece of high ground is in the middle of a lake. Is it? James gasped. Lauren nodded slowly. As a rule, the blue bits on a map indicate water. Good point, James grinned weakly. You passed my test. Jake thumped his palm against his forehead. Why do I always get put on the rubbish team? The cherubs all gathered on the stretch of road outside the main building to find that 20 sets of appropriately sized kit had been laid out behind an army truck. Body armour, weapons, and a backpack for each trainee. The sun was starting to drop, but it was still warm. The truck leaves in 8 minutes, Mr. Large shouted. Let's move it, muffins! James sat on the tarmac and pulled off his boots before stepping into a chunky, Kevlar-lined overall. By the time he'd pulled on the heavy gloves, strapped on the helmet, and pushed down the visor, he was boiling hot. Jake was struggling to load his gun with his gloved hands, so James walked over to help him out. 5 minutes, Large shouted. 50 punishment laps for any kid who holds up the truck. James clipped the ammunition onto his gun, then looked at Jake. Are you okay? You look like a ghost. Jake grinned uneasily. How bad do you think it hurts when those bullets hit you? Pretty bad, but don't worry, there's 4 of us looking out for you. James held the loaded weapon out for Jake, but Jake backed away and scowled at the ground. I don't want to go, he said anxiously, tugging at the chin strap of his helmet to unbuckle it. I changed my mind. James groaned with frustration. Until Jake turned 10 and committed himself to becoming a CHERUB agent, he didn't have to go on any training exercises if he didn't want to. But James knew he'd catch hell from Mr. Large if a member of his team dropped out minutes before the exercise was due to start. James desperately tried to think up a way to talk Jake around. You're lucky, you know, coming to CHERUB before you're 10. I only got 3 weeks before they put me into basic training. I was unfit, and I could barely even swim. I'm sorry, James, Jake sniffled. I'm tired. I want to go to bed. Don't back out now. You're a tough little guy. What's the hold-up? Dana asked. We need to get on that truck. James shrugged hopelessly. Jake doesn't want to go. Doesn't he? Dana grinned. She flipped up her visor and pressed her beefy hands down on Jake's shoulders. What's your dysfunction, brat? Are you chicken? No, Jake said defiantly. Do you know how bad your mates are going to flame you when they find out that you bottled it? Jake couldn't think of an answer. Do you really want to go back to the junior block? Dana asked. They'll laugh their socks off when you walk around that corner into the rec room. Jake said meekly. Don't give me brat, Dana said. Take your gun from James and put your helmet back on. You're going to go out there and show everyone what you're made of. I'll cover your back, okay? Jake was a little scared of Dana, but the idea of this imposing girl looking out for him was reassuring. He nodded obediently at her before taking his gun from James. Okay, soldier, Dana grinned, giving Jake a friendly pat on the back. Grab your pack and go climb into the truck. James smiled at Dana as Jake headed towards the truck. Thanks. Dana returned a look of contempt as she pushed her visor back down over her face. You should study the tricks the instructors use to motivate us, she said harshly. What little boy wants to get teased by his mates? James nodded. Look, Dana, I know it's awkward, Me being in charge when you're older and more experienced than me. It's not awkward, James. It's idiotic. So spare me your stupid pep talk and let's get this over with. Chapter 6. Yoke. The urban warfare compound was a rectangle 1 kilometre by 1.5. It was designed for soldiers training in attacking or defending built-up areas. Teams A to C had already been dropped at their starting points. Mr. Large pulled the canvas-covered truck up sharply, and Mr. Pike, who'd ridden in the back alongside the kids, slid a bolt, allowing the rear flap of the truck to slam down. "Team D," Pike shouted. "What are you waiting for?" Pike handed each kid a box containing 6 unbroken eggs before they jumped down. James was first out, followed by Jake, Lauren, Bethany, and Dana. James glanced around as the truck pulled away and Bethany unfurled the map. The artificial town had a surreal air. Rusted cars lined the streets, with all their windows removed to avoid any danger from flying glass. The buildings were finished in bare concrete and were designed to simulate different kinds of environments: shops, homes, offices, and warehouses. Some were as much as 4 stories tall. The legacy of thousands of mock battles lay everywhere. Black scorch marks on the walls, metal shell casings in the gutters, and everything spattered in brightly coloured paint. With no moving vehicles and a population of 20 kids, the compound was eerily quiet. All James could hear were the footsteps of his teammates and the passage of each nervous breath around the inside of his helmet. "Any bright ideas?" James asked. Lauren pointed at a building a few hundred metres into the distance. "I like that one," she said. "It backs onto the corner of the compound, meaning we only have to defend it from 2 sides. It's also nice and high, so we can station a lookout on the roof." Dana tutted. "Yeah, microbrain, but it's also blindingly obvious." Lauren reared up. "Who are you calling microbrain, cheesy?" "You try calling me cheesy again," Dana screamed, facing Lauren off, "and I'll rip off your head and spit down your neck." James placed himself between the 2 girls. "Calm down and stop yelling. We're supposed to be killing everyone else, not each other." "Suppose someone comes after us," Dana spat. "They know we were dropped in this area, and that's the first place they'll come looking." "Well, that's where I think we should go," Lauren said, sounding narked. Okay, James said, feeling the pressure of being in charge. "What if we station a sniper on the roof of Lauren's building, then we'll barricade the door so it looks like we're all in there. But really, all except one of us are in the low building opposite." "That might just work," Dana nodded. "If anyone comes by and tries to storm the building with the sniper inside, you lot can steam out from behind and ambush them." James looked at Dana. "Do you want to go up the stairs and be the sniper? Are you a good shot?" "Better than any of you, I expect," Dana said. "Though it'll be pitch dark soon, and we haven't got night scopes. If you hear anyone, start shooting so that they think we're in there." "What if it's one of you guys?" Dana asked. James looked blank. "We need a signal," Bethany said. "Meow like a cat or something, then you'll know it's one of us." James nodded. "But if you hear a meow, return with a bark, like a dog. That way we know it's not someone ripping off our noise. And remember, once it gets dark, sound is the best way of tracking us. Only call out if you absolutely must." "Okay," Dana said, as she set off towards the high building. "You'd better not make a mess of this. I'll see you losers later." Lauren waited until Dana was out of earshot before responding. "Not if I see you first, cheesy. And thanks for taking her side, James." James tutted. "It's not a question of taking sides, Lauren. Face facts. Dana was right." "This is all very well if your plan to lure the opposition towards the big building works," Lauren sniped. "But what if they see through it?" "Will you shut up and let me think?" James said. "We need to get under cover. Kerry's team was only dropped a few hundred metres from here. They could be on our backs any second." James led Lauren, Bethany, and Jake towards a single-level structure with a canopy designed to resemble a fast food stand. He opened the aluminium door and stepped inside, surprised by how cramped the space was. Bethany and Lauren, keep the chatter down and watch out of the window. Me and Jake will cover the rear. There's a duffel bag behind this table, Bethany said excitedly as she crouched down near the back window. James turned towards her. Large said we'd find extra equipment scattered around the training area. The team gathered in a semicircle. Bethany undid the buckle and opened the bag, revealing 5 pairs of night vision goggles. The sets were specifically designed to clip onto their helmets. Sweet, James grinned. These will give us a massive advantage once it starts getting dark. Hang on though, Lauren said. This is the first building we've been in, and we've already found some valuable equipment. For all we know, there's something useful in every building. Bethany finished her sentence. And if we hole up here while the other teams grab a load of fancy equipment, we could end up being totally outgunned. James, Lauren, and Bethany looked at each other. Lauren, James said, you stay here with Jake. Be ready to start shooting if someone attacks Dana's building. Me and Bethany can head out onto the street. We're going to check all the other buildings and see what we can find. What am I, an octopus? Lauren gasped. I can't do all that on my own. You'll have to try your best, James said stiffly. You've got Jake with you. Great, a red shirt, Lauren sneered. What's he going to do? I don't want to stay with her, Jake said. Can I go outside with you, James? James, Lauren said, this isn't a strategy. This is a disaster. 1 minute we're all holing up here waiting for an ambush. Now you want us all to split up. If someone comes after us, we'll get picked off one at a time. Well, what do you want me to do, sis? James whispered angrily. I'm the team leader. Being my sister doesn't give you the right to start an argument over every single decision I make. Now, I know this isn't ideal, but we can't let the other teams get hold of all the equipment. How about I stay here with Bethany and you go out hunting with Jake? Fine, whatever, James said angrily. I'll go out with Jake. You stay here and play dollhouses with your little friend. It was hard to read Lauren's expression through the visor over her face, but James was fairly sure she was glowering at him. He spun on his heel and crashed out of the aluminium door. Before realising how stupid it was to make so much noise, James felt a loud crack against the side of his helmet. As he stumbled sideways, a second shot tore painfully into his ribs. The paint dribbling down his side was yellow, indicating that he'd been shot by a member of Kyle's team. James had been hit hundreds of times by paintballs. It wasn't nice, but the stinging went away 10 minutes later. The simulated ammunition was in a different league. James could hardly draw breath as he collapsed against the side of the building. Luckily, the third shot skimmed past his shoulder and clanged into the metal door behind him. As James gasped, he spotted the 11-year-old twin girls from Kyle's team ducking down behind a car. James reached for his gun, but the pain in his chest made him clumsy. Don't think so, the girls chanted as they came out of cover with their weapons aimed at James. Drop your gun and throw us the pack with your eggs in. James didn't want to surrender his eggs, but the girls were standing at the regulation 3-metre minimum shooting distance, and he'd already found out how painful the simulated rounds could be from much further out. As James unhooked his pack, a red shot smashed into the thigh of one girl, sweeping her right leg from under her. James realised it had to be Dana, firing from up high. A second later, Bethany booted open the door behind him and shot at the other one. The round missed, but the girl ducked, and James used the instant while she was distracted to roll forwards and aim his gun. He took great satisfaction in blasting the girl who'd shot him moments earlier. She fell over backwards, and James pumped her twice in the back from minimum range. The twist of fortune had taken seconds. Now the twin girls were writhing on the ground, with James, Dana, and Bethany pointing guns at them. "Let's have those guns over here," James said. "No sudden moves." It took a while, because both girls were hurt. As soon as they pushed the guns out of reach, James ran in and grabbed them. He unclipped the magazines before flipping back the operating handles and pocketing the driving springs. Without this small component, the rifles were useless. "Give us your backpacks," James ordered, menacing the girls with his rifle. The searing pain in his chest and the fear of getting shot again had left James running on his most basic survival instincts. He didn't give a damn about the feelings of the two girls squirming at his feet. "You can't shoot us from this close," one girl said desperately as he closed back in to grab their backpacks. "Sue me," James snarled, jabbing the girl with his gun as he ripped the pack off her shoulder. "Why don't you write a letter to the United Nations?" James threw one pack backwards towards Bethany and unzipped the other one himself. He threw down the polystyrene egg box and smashed it under the heel of his boot. Bethany did the same. It was a good feeling, destroying 1/3 of Team A's eggs less than 20 minutes into the 12-hour exercise. "What can we do with them?" Bethany asked as she contemptuously wiped her eggy boot onto her victim's suit. "They know our position, and we're not allowed to take hostages. We'll have to move out of here." As Bethany spoke, James noticed a lump of plastic rolling from beneath one of the cars at the curbside. He instantly knew it was a stun grenade, but didn't get a chance to take cover before its powder blue flash erupted. He stumbled backwards, half blind, as the bitter taste of smoke hit the back of his mouth. He recognized Kyle's voice. "How'd you like that little toy, Adams?" Another stun grenade erupted. This one had been lobbed through the back window of the food stand. Lauren screamed as she stumbled blindly out of the aluminium door, with Jake close behind her. Kyle howled in pain as Dana shot him from up high. She'd picked out a perfect shot through the smoke, hitting Kyle in the scantily protected area where the helmet met the padded overall. James only got a second to gloat before he felt an excruciating pain in his lower back. He caught sight of the blue paint spattered on his sleeves and looked over his shoulder to find all 5 members of Kerry's team closing on his position in a V formation. James had already taken 3 painful shots and he couldn't face getting hit more as Kerry and Kyle's teams closed from opposing directions. He lost all thoughts of leadership as he scrambled to his feet, cut down a side street, and ran away as fast as he could. He ran a few hundred meters through the streets, almost to the opposite side of the training compound. He found a house and fired a couple of rounds inside. When nobody fired back, he jumped through the glassless window and dropped to the concrete floor. There were blue flashes from stun grenades and the constant rat-tat of simulated ammunition as the 3-way battle raged on in the distance. The sky was turning amber, meaning it would be dark inside half an hour. James had taken 3 hits. The first shot had ricocheted harmlessly off his helmet. There was a dull ache in his stomach from the second, but the shot to his lower back was the killer. An agonizing spasm fired down his leg as he slumped onto the floor. He felt relieved at getting away from the action as he caught his breath, but he quickly realized that as the senior agent, he had to go back and try to reunite his team before darkness fell. Before standing back up, he broke the rules by turning towards the wall, flipping up his visor, and wiping away the sweat streaking down his face. When James looked up, he noticed a grey box in the corner. He scuttled across and was delighted to find a dozen ammo clips. Everyone had started with 2 28-round clips for their rifle. James had nearly used a full clip already, and he realised that as the night went on, ammo was going to become a valuable commodity. James locked a full clip onto his rifle and stacked the remainder into his pack, even though each clip weighed more than a kilogram. He walked cautiously back towards the window and listened. The battle had splintered into numerous smaller actions, characterised by short bursts of gunfire spread over a wider area. James realised that this greatly increased his chances of coming under fire on his return journey. He kept low as he exited the building into a narrow alleyway, ducking below the roofline of the parked cars, with a paint-spattered breeze-block wall at his back. He ended up in a main road, keeping a finger on the trigger and breaking into a sprint as he cut across the road. "Meow?" James stopped in his tracks and crouched down beside a car, unable to work out where the sound had come from. "Woof," he answered cautiously. Two heads popped up inside a car parked on a driveway. Because of the orange sunlight reflecting on the visors, it took a second before James recognized Dana and Jake. "Get over here, dingus," Dana whispered. "There's a bunch of Team A kids hiding out 3 doors up the road." James quietly opened the car door. He dragged himself across the multicolored stains over the rear seat, being careful to keep his head below window height. He noticed Dana was covered in about 20 splats of different colored paint. "You got nuked," James gasped. "Do any of them hurt?" "Not too bad. Most of the hits were from long range," Dana said bitterly. "I'm going to have so many bruises, I'll look like a black man in the morning. All my eggs got smashed too." "Who got hold of you?" James asked. "Nobody actually got me. They just got mashed up when I was rolling around on the floor being shot at." "All but one of my eggs are cracked as well," James nodded. "So how come you ended up all the way out here?" "I tried to follow after you when you shat your pants and ran away," Dana explained. "Jumped down from a first-floor window and picked up Jake along the way." "I didn't shit my pants," James said indignantly. "I made a tactical decision to withdraw under heavy fire." Dana laughed. "Ah, that's one way of putting it, I guess." James decided not to push the point. Dana's description of events was uncomfortably close to the truth. He looked at Jake and tried to sound encouraging. "So how are you holding up?" "Okay," Jake said brightly. "I shot up some people in the battle." "I think the little guy just found some balls," Dana said, breaking into a rare smile. "I watched him come out of that building you guys were hiding out in. First he kind of froze, but then he took cover and put in some good shots." James looked admiringly at his little teammate. "Did you get hit?" Jake rolled over onto his side and proudly showed off the giant splat of lilac paint on his thigh. "It hurts, but I don't care. This must be 50 times more exciting than the best computer game ever." James was delighted by the way Jake had handled stress. Some people freak out in volatile situations, but it looked like CHERUB's selection process had done its usual job of picking out a kid who could handle himself when it really counted. "Do you still want to quit?" James asked. "No way," Jake said. "I want to get hold of someone and smash up their eggs." James laughed. "So, did either of you see the other girls?" "I think I saw Lauren and Bethany heading off together," Jake said. "Do you reckon we should go and look for them?" James asked. Dana pondered for a couple of seconds. "It's too risky. There are 15 other kids out there, and only 2 of them are our girls. Lauren and Bethany can look after themselves. If we bump into them, that's great, but if we go out searching, we'll most likely get shot up." "I think you're right," James nodded. "So what do we do?" Jake asked. James thought for a few seconds. "I've got plenty of ammo in my pack, and 3 sets of night vision goggles. This car isn't secure. We're sitting ducks if anyone walks by and spots us. I say we hide out in one of the houses nearby until it gets completely dark. Then I'll hand out the night vision goggles, and we can go out on a little egg hunt." Dana nodded grudgingly. "I can think of worse ideas."